Hey.
Hello.
Hi, Larry.
Hi.
So this is Cynthia Allen here, and we are wanting to address a question that was asked of Larry last night in a live, excuse me, in a live session, which is it cheating to use something like NLP to help you? Maybe you just have to grow through it. And I thought this was such a great question. Did you, Larry? I mean, it was like really.
Yeah, I hadn't been asked that kind of question before, and it took some thought, and I would have had to ask more questions to know precisely what that meant, and it just wasn't the appropriate setting for it. But we can speak about it now.
Yeah. So that's what we're gonna address. Yeah, that's what we're gonna address tonight, and kind of
with the idea that it's cheating. That it appears, there must be in that situation there must be some set of rules, and there'll be rules that I don't know about, maybe, except. There are those religious beliefs that believe that that suffering is redemptive, and so I don't now if that was the context.
That was the context. And I just want to stop for a minute and just say hi to people who are tuning in. We're gonna give you a minute to tune in. We see Kathy White is tuned in. If you give, if you're on Facebook and watching us, if you give Facebook permission, then we'll actually see your name if you make any kind of comments. And otherwise, we'll get your comments, but we won't know who it was. And you can ask a question yourself to us if you'd like. We may or may not have your name, and Larry will tackle that. So the question that was asked last night was, did Larry think it might be cheating to use NLP for some things when growth, so they had a very specific, hi Joe, they had a very specific context when people might really just need to grow through it. That was their context, was people might need to grow through it. So let's start. Here, Larry, give us your thought of that as from an NLP perspective.
Well, no. I mean, that's my immediate response, and the image that comes to my mind a little bit as I thought about it is that is it cheating to take a car to the doctor instead of walking? Because I might learn something if I walked. It's not a perfect analogy or metaphor, but now, unless there's some specific, I would assume, personal reason for thinking that I shouldn't get this, shouldn't make this change or get help with making this change, or making this change quickly. If there's some reason for not doing that, then of course, you would be defeating your purpose to come to an NLP practitioner. But I personally don't know what that would be. I can think of several scenarios, but it would have to do with the person's belief system. Like I mentioned, there is the belief in some religions that suffering or difficulty is redemptive. And if that happens to be the belief system or of you or your religion, of course, I wouldn't want to interfere with that. And of course, you wouldn't be coming to me.
Probably not, yeah.
Probably would not be coming to me,
Well, I want to thank the people who've tuned in. We have quite a few actually that joined us.
Yeah.
Say hi to Patricia, who, as like Kathy, has registered over at StreamYard or on YouTube so that she could watch. So thanks so much, Kathy, for joining us. And also the person who said, I'm so curious about NLP as a newbie. So great, we'll talk about it a little bit. So I've had so many thoughts since I heard this question. Like, I started sorting back through clients that I have worked with over the years. And as you know, Larry, I normally refer a client who's having a lot of difficulty with PTSD to come to you, and then they come back and do Feldenkrais. And the reason that I do that is because I feel like if the NLP can take the sting out of the trauma, and then it's easier for them to accept the Feldenkrais work as we go along. And I've noticed that quite a few people come to you, but I've also had a couple people that have said to me something very similar to what I thought this question was last night, which is, no, I think it has lessons to teach me, and I need to work through those lessons. So I respect that, but I've also noticed that they're still working on those lessons 15, 20 years later. Some of these people have been with me for quite a while, so that makes me curious too. So I wondered if it might, because these are Americans, I'm an American as in a United States citizen. I know that we misuse the word American actually in the US. And I wonder if it maybe even has something to do with this old-fashioned thing we've been taught, which is to pull ourselves up by the bootstraps.
Could be. I mean, if that, that could be the belief system. Clearly, I've been in positions where I think I should be able to take care of myself and I shouldn't need help. And on the one hand, on the other hand, yeah, I mean, it really does have to do with the belief systems. For example, I've had people who believed that they deserved whatever the difficulty was. Mm-hmm. And it's not my job to persuade them otherwise. If that's the belief system and it seems to be working for them, then we just go with that, and they're satisfied. Mm-hmm. So
well, it reminds me of this thing that Moshe Feldenkrais said, which is people have a difficulty and they carry it around like it's their cross to bear.
Right.
And they don't even realize that they're carrying it in their body, that it's showing in their shoulders, it's showing in their way of being every day in the world, but it is for other people.
Right. And yeah, it's a kind of an interesting, I mean, it's a deeper question than I usually get in terms of that. And of course, my immediate response would have been, had this person been sitting in front of me, or just the two of us, would be, so what do you think? What makes you think that would be cheating? What's the belief system behind that? And are you satisfied with that? This could also be a question about permission. Okay, by the way, if I do this, is it going to be okay?
That's good. So there's so many things that could be behind these different situations. Like one of them that I think, actually I want to say hi to Terry. And also I want to say, somebody said, perfect response, Larry, jogging with your car is cheating, but not
right.
The aim is quicker.
I wanted to acknowledge that. So
yeah, and someone else says, in my humble opinion, it also could be a form of chronicity to avoid shortcuts. So yeah, it could be a habit to avoid shortcuts. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, we use that term shortcuts pejoratively when we're talking about building construction or something like that, making shortcuts, which often means using, poor materials, not completing it quite, those kinds of things. And the other question is, cheating whom? Against whom are you cheating? Who gets left out? Who gets short sheeted or whatever? Are you cheating yourself, or are you cheating someone else? Does it feel like cheating?
And so this question was in response, for people who don't know what NLP is. Can you say something about how it focuses on solutions and why this question would have even came up, Larry?
Yeah, but the very short answer about NLP is, what are the internal pictures, internal sounds, dialogue, words, actual feelings that you have that hold you in that unwanted condition? I mean, if you come in and you know, I lose it every time something happens, or I get angry, I've got a problem with being under these conditions. How do you do that? Or I'm experiencing grief, and there's a lot of stuff going on around the issue of grief. I was teaching this at the university. Had a student who was grieving the passing of her mother, and it had been, I don't know, a year and a half or so. And she was struggling with two things. First of all, the grief was still somewhat debilitating, and she was beginning to feel like she was losing the picture of mother, and she felt guilty. You know, if I don't grieve, am I guilty? Does it mean I didn't care? Well, of course not. So we had that kind of issue going on. So on the one hand, she wanted to get to the next stage of her grieving process, but there was this whole thing about guilt that was preventing it. And so you have to do that. So one of the things we do is figure out how it is she's holding the grief. What images is she making?
And Larry, would that take you like many sessions to figure that out, or would that happen in one?
We did it in front of a classroom of 30 some people in some 25 minutes or less. So no, in that case, no.
So then it's very
going to be counselors and stuff. They want to know how to do it. So go ahead.
So it's very solution focused.
Yes.
Generally, people don't sign up to do many years of NLP sessions. They're usually going to do a few sessions around a specific issue.
Right. It's not psychotherapy. It is how you're holding it in your body, in your mind, and you change the way that it's being held, and the experience changes.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And it happens. The brain works very, very quickly. If you stretch it out, it just gets bored and doesn't pay attention anymore.
Mm-hmm. So I want to say hi to Joe Webster and Sarah Thomas. And Joe said that he thinks using a term like expedient path is nicer than the word shortcut.
Exactly.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I agree with you, Joe. I appreciate the comment.
Yeah. So, I mean, I do think, of course, that their growth is important, but let's say that let's say that I'm really struggling with trauma and I can hardly function. Like, I find it difficult to function. This is not a stretch for me because I went through this period of my life. And then I'm able somehow to get a handle on the trauma so that it no longer occupies all of my mind. It doesn't mean that I don't continue to grow. I think it actually means I now have a chance to grow.
Right. Yeah, a couple of things about that. First of all, when I'm working with a client, one of the questions I ask is, would it be okay if you didn't have that problem? And that's how I found out about the young lady in the class about she was sort of feeling guilty. You know, would it be okay? What kind of problems would solving this problem, what other problems would arise?
So what other problems would arise if you no longer grieved your mother?
Yeah.
And she said,
or grieved in that way that kept her debilitated.
And she said, I would feel guilty.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And sometimes you have to ask those kinds of questions because people don't often think about the consequences of making that change. I want to comment to Joe, who says maybe they think that the process should be inherently difficult. Well, I think most of us have been taught that making changes is difficult and often takes a lot of time, and it's very painful, but it doesn't have to be that way. And so that's one of the main things about NLP is that we do not want to reintroduce people to their trauma. So we avoid that, but you do have to have that. Also, one of the things that we do, Joe, is to make sure that I often say this in the words in the idea of the part of you that's responsible for this. I want to make sure when we change this that it retains all of the useful learning information.
That seems key.
I don't want that to go away. And we don't create amnesia. Generally, they still are able to recall the situation. They just don't feel the same about it anymore. It doesn't have the impact on their lives anymore. Not that way.
Not the severe negative impact.
Yeah, not the severe negative impact. A colleague of mine who was a clergy person in a little town in Missouri, where there was a university there, she knew these processes, and the university hired her to interview women who had been assaulted, date rapes and those sort of things, because she could get information from them that a normal kind of interview wouldn't. She knew how to help them separate from the feelings of the situation and gain more accurate information about what actually happened, because the person could answer specific questions without re-experiencing the trauma.
Boy, what a great application for NLP.
Yeah, and it was.
Oh my gosh, I never even thought about that. Like for police or detectives or people who are working those cases, or there are nurses who train specifically in handling sexual assault cases. What an incredible skill set that would be for them.
Right.
Wow. Yeah, so someone says, yes, learning that positive change does not have to be a long, painful process. I had to learn that with Feldenkrais. Yeah. Good. Yeah.
Right.
That's a place where they do in fact relate in the belief system that it does not have to be painful, that we don't think that pain is helpful except as a motivator, right? As a message for something useful. And then from that, it may not even take as long as we thought it would, right? So yes, so how would NLP handle childhood memories? I don't have many childhood memories, but I have a belief that it negatively impacts me. How would you start with that, Larry?
Well, first of all, I would begin asking, so how does this interfere with you right now? And by the way, one of our beliefs is that the subconscious, really is designed to protect us. So I'm reluctant sometimes to, to dredge up old things. But first of all, I'm fearful of creating bad memories. And I was in a small town in Missouri, and there was this counselor there. 85% of his clients were, they called them multiple personalities at that point. They're now a dissociative identity disorder, and but it turns out he's creating them in his office. And I've had people who work at creating false memories. So I'm interested in the fact that you don't have many childhood memories. I would like to know, how does that bother you? How does that create a problem for you? And then we will work on that. If that turns out that we discover some memories, then we would have to deal with that. But if it turned out that it was not necessarily the fact that you don't have them, You don't remember what happened, except for the fact that you don't remember what happened. I mean, we would find out what's going on behind that.
Well, I think that one of the things that NLP really excels at is you first really clarify what the person's goal is. So it sounds like the goal for this person might be, because we're making this up off of a little tiny snippet here, that she feels negatively impacted in her life by what she thinks might be childhood memories. So she'd like to feel better. There's some aspect of her life that feels like it's controlled by the past.
Yeah, and I would be interested in finding out how specifically does that negatively impact her, and then deal with it. I mean, like I said, if you can create multiple personalities, you can do a lot of things. And I don't want to do something that's dangerous. I want to know what would happen if you had them. What would happen if these memories suddenly flooded in?
But couldn't you just deal with would you not have to deal with that? Can't you find another way to
No, exactly.
work with the negative feeling?
Asking the question, not am I going to do it? I'm asking the question, what do you suppose would happen if it did happen, if you did get it? What then would, let's talk about the specific way that it impacts you presently. The fact that you feel like you don't have it. How define negatively? I want to know what that feels like, what it looks like, what it sounds like, and we would deal with that. We may not discover any memories.
You're just describing a very customized approach.
Yeah.
Based on the person's responses.
Exactly. Well, that's excellent. My goal would be to be a better parent. Mm-hmm. Well, that's an entirely different thing, and may or may not have anything to do with your past, with your, it may very well be protecting you to make you a better parent. Who knows? But if your goal is to be a better parent, let's talk about what that would look like. And we can do that. We can establish that. And that, by the way, is also going to be a process. And so what's the underlying beliefs about being a good parent? That's a worthy goal. But I don't think it necessarily has to come from having memories.
Oh, but that's her belief. So then we go with that.
Then we would talk about that and see how that would help. Yeah.
Yeah. There's no need to talk her out of that.
That wouldn't be my goal.
Yeah.
But the goal that she states here is great. Well, let's deal specifically with that goal. Mm-hmm. Okay.
Yes. So someone says, my daughter can remember the doctors and the lights at the hospital where she was a preemie. So I'm assuming that this, they'd have to say something else about it, but I'm assuming that this is not a pleasant memory for her daughter. Is that correct? Could you post that? And then I guess you're wondering, if that's correct, wondering how that would be worked with. So that's, I'm going to just assume that it was not a pleasant memory for her, that she can remember that, and that it brings up bad difficulties for her. So that's an example of a post-traumatic stress response, if that's the case. And what's the way in which NLP normally works with that, Larry?
What's your beliefs about that? What does that memory mean to her in terms of, are we talking about that means that it was a very painful experience? And I want to know how that creates a problem for her, and then deal with it from that way. One of the things that could happen is what we call reframe, the realization that the pain that she experienced during that time, when she realized how much caring and loving was involved in that might change. I don't know. That would be an experience, an experiment in that way. Okay.
And then stick with that for a minute. So could it not also the rewind method possibly work?
It could. Yeah. I guess the question is, how old is she?
Well, let's assume she's old enough to,
Yeah, she has to be. So,
yeah.
The truth is the youngest I'd worked with for childhood trauma was 6 years old.
Okay. So
Because
this was her first memory when she was able to verbalize, and she asked me then why I let them do that to her. Oh, oh man. Mm. Mm.
Yeah, and that indicates that she's young enough still to know that sometimes help hurts. I mean, so we'll have to that definitely then probably would be some kind of rewind methodology.
Yeah, she's 20 years old now, so
oh my gosh,
she'd be able to follow. She would be able to follow directions to do something like the rewind method. So from Larry talked about this a little bit last night, but it's a very painless way to what I call scrambling the memory so that the bad feelings go away.
Right.
So I think it's that's what I often refer to Larry for. I want to back up to somebody
the brain to unlearn how to feel that way while retaining the memory.
Mm-hmm. I'm going to back up, Larry. Somebody said that they really like to bring in the senses. What does it smell like, feel like?
Right, exactly.
Yeah.
That's what I was saying. I want to know what she sees, what she hears, what she feels. And the kinesthetic includes gustatory and olfactory, taste and smell as well.
Uh-huh. Someone else says, I had a therapist who was one of those who created false memories. So first, let me just say I'm really sorry for that. I have seen it happen a few times. I feel like it may still be affecting me because I have difficulty trusting anyone, especially those who are, quotes, helpers. How could NLP benefit this?
Well, the question is about how do I learn to trust, or what? Say it again, Cynthia.
Yeah.
I'm not seeing it up there.
Well, it's about 4 or 5 up. You'll have to scroll up.
Okay.
So I'll read it again.
Good, please.
I had a therapist who was one who created false memories. So she's had a violated relationship with a helper.
Okay.
I feel like it may still be affecting me because I have a lot of difficulty trusting anyone, especially those who are, quotes, helpers.
Okay.
How could NLP benefit this?
So we have a number of ways in which we can change the way you feel about past experiences. Everything from, like I said, from trauma to just embarrassment. One of the first lessons, one of the first skills I learned was how to deal with past memories that were just embarrassing. And so I was getting a chance to work on it with a family member, and I said, I want you to pick some experience from your past where you were just embarrassed by what happened, and if you had some different resources, it could have turned out differently. And they didn't catch what I was saying, and began to wanted to work on a very abusive situation, and that's not appropriate. I was able to detect that and stop it so that we didn't get into the middle of something that I was not prepared to deal with. But there are methods and processes, I should say, that I would lead you through where you and your brain change how you feel, how you experience that memory. So yeah, that's exactly what I would do, is help them. I want to state clearly that I'm not an advice giver. I'm pretty good at making up ways to solve problems for myself. But if I were to tell you what to do, what the outcome was going to be, it might not work for you. It would work for me, but it wouldn't work for you. So the whole process is for you, your brain, your unconscious, to figure out what's appropriate for you in that situation in order for you to appropriately change the experience, the way you feel about it.
I think one of her challenges is going to be actually showing up to let someone else help her now that she's had a violated experience. How could she make that safe, or how would you help her make that safe for her?
Well, the first thing that I almost always do especially when I'm working with women, even when I have never met them before, one of the first things I do is when they come into the office, I ask the question, how uncomfortable are you about being in a room with a man you don't know by yourself? I want to know about that. I want to give you permission and the authority. You're the one in charge there. I'm going to ask some questions, but you're the one that's in charge. And I want to make sure that you're feeling safe there. So, it depends on what the situation is, but I want to make sure. So the point is, you remember that you're in control, that you can be in control, and you can stop whatever, you need to be able to stop whatever's going on if you need to. Mm. So the first thing I would do was suggest to her, and if she was a client, one of the first things I would do was help her develop for herself this sense of power and authority.
Right. And we don't know if this is a woman or a man, but yeah. I mean, I also think that NLP has lots of different ways of working, some of which involve taking people into deep states of relaxation, but they don't all. And so this would be a case where I would think Larry would choose not to take you into a deep state of relaxation because you've already experienced somebody embedding false memories for right. you. So you would very much stay in control of the situation. Yeah. So I'm going to go back to the person who has the 20-year-old who has a quadriplegic cerebral palsy. And what she only remembers is the fear and the bright lights and why I did not help her. So she stores that as a sensation or something in her body, correct, Larry?
Yes. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Where is that? And again, it's really flexible. It's these processes are flexible within themselves. So I take the process the way I learned it, and bend it, help shape it to fit the specific situation. And as she remembers that, one of the easiest things is to ask her, where is it in your visual field? Where do you see it? Is it right here in front of you? What happens when we move it over here? By the way, she's assigned a specific meaning to that experience. What if that's not the only meaning? What if there's this meaning behind it? You change that meaning, that it means something else. I know sort of the reverse of women was fairly active in her church. She wasn't really active, but somewhat. And she had a young child, 3 years old or almost 3 years old, that contracted a childhood disease that went on into encephalitis and died. So we had a funeral and a visitation the night prior to, and lots of people came to express their concern and give their condolences, and they sat down and was just being present there. And after the funeral, she refused to go back to church. And it wasn't until, many years later when I was in a conversation with, so why was it that you didn't go back to church? And she said, because they sat there to watch and see if I behaved properly. I said, are you kidding? Couldn't that mean they cared? They just didn't want you to be there alone, and they wanted to express their concern for you? Well, she hadn't ever even thought of that. Mm-hmm. Now, that's one of those cases where she assigned some meaning about it and didn't check it out and lived for 10 years or more angry and hurt by the people who were trying to demonstrate care. So your daughter's in somewhat of the same situation. They weren't trying to be mean to her. They were trying to keep her alive. I mean, that's my guess. How can that be reframed? Well, and the implication that you're saying is that she feels she's sort of blaming you, and so that's another thing that we might need to address for her and for you. Mm-hmm. How it must feel terrible when she asked that question.
Well, I'm thinking it feels terrible for the daughter as well. I mean, the daughter is absolutely feeling like her mother abandoned her at a really key time, and so she probably would like to change that feeling.
I'm sorry exactly, but I'm sorry if I didn't make that clear. Mm-hmm. I want to change that. I would want to help her change that feeling.
Yeah, and so it would be this process of just asking a few key questions about what the daughter would like to feel instead, and then helping her move towards that in a very quick way. That's right. Yeah. Yes, of course she's very scared of all the medical stuff and gets stiff. Boy, I'll tell you, I had my share of medical procedures, and I can totally understand. I understand that, and that would be a nice thing for her to be able to get some freedom from, wouldn't it? For her and for you. Yeah. So whoever said thank you for doing this to Larry and I, thank you for appreciating it. We like that.
Yeah, right. Okay.
Well, so see if we have any other thoughts about it. So I also was thinking about that question as in relationship to identity issues. Like, I sometimes feel like for myself, I've noticed at different passages in my life where I was really struggling. It turned out that I had really started to define myself by the problem. So when the original question was asked, would it be cheating? I also thought about that a little bit, like, what if, and I don't believe that this is who the person who asked it. I think that he was asking it globally around a way of thinking about life. He wasn't asking for himself. So I just want to make that clear. But then I have taken it a lot of different places in my mind. And I thought, well, there's been times in my life where my identity got shaped by my actual problem. And I became, I found it hard for the problem to resolve but I didn't know this. I didn't know it, right? Because I was so identified with the problem. I was so identified with it.
Yeah, but I mean, identity is a huge issue. Somebody who's had even a behavior for a long period of time. I have just run into this thing about with things like smoking or drinking. Who am I if I don't smoke? I've been a smoker for 20 years. Who am I if I don't? There are certain changes that people will have to figure out how they're going to negotiate their way through life with this kind of change, because it's so much different, not just about smoking, but about the way they respond to certain situations. If they don't respond that way, I mean, I'm wrapped up. The classic example is retirement. Who am I after I retire? I've been so identified with my work. One of my early clients, when I came to Cincinnati, came in, and he was an attorney. He and a friend had started another little business on the side, and they had recently sold that business. And he said to me, you know, I woke up this morning realizing I don't have to work another day in my life. I no longer will ever have to struggle with financial issues. I thought, what a great problem to have, you know, from my perspective. But for him, it was, why am I doing what am I doing, what I'm doing? Who am I? Who am I now? It's a real issue, this thing about identity. When I was
thinking about the two big identity junctures that I am conscious of, right? Well, actually, I am a three, but I'll talk about the two that I think might surprise people. And one is the identity that I had always been a sickly child. And so then I went into adulthood and I was still a sickly individual. And it really wasn't until I was doing the Feldenkrais work that I started to realize that that was an identity issue for me, that it was going to hold me back if I continued to keep that. And the other one was that I had an identity as a victim for so long. And that was a difficult one to become conscious of so that it could be changed. So I can see how people show up in our practices with these identity issues, and we may be able to help them shift those through something like physical therapy or the Feldenkrais work, or et cetera, but it might be better addressed with something like NLP.
Yeah, so all of this began with this business about, is this cheating? Mm-hmm. I think not. Obviously, I said, what would be my immediate response? Absolutely not. There's lots of ways to learn lessons of life. And being stuck in this one thing for Cynthia to live the rest of her life, feeling like she was a victim, or was going to be, made it virtually impossible for her to relax at any moment, really, because you know, something terrible is going to happen any minute now, or by anybody. I can't, and it's a very terrible way to live.
So I just want to start to wrap us up, and I'll let you know a couple things. First, we're going to be on a live cast tomorrow, Friday at 3:30 p.m. Eastern time. And what's going to happen at that live cast is Larry is going to be talking individually with some past students in his NLP Success Program. And they're going to talk about what has NLP meant to them and how their lives have changed. So that's an opportunity that's coming up tomorrow. And I'll be sure I post that. If you're on our email list, you definitely got it. Maybe today, I think you got it today. But I'll try to post how you would find out about that. I know I can't post Zoom links in these groups because it makes us prone to spam, but we'll figure out a way to post that. And then, or we might, try to figure out how we could do, that's probably what we'll do. I don't think we'll use this piece of technology. And then also Larry and I plan to go live a couple more times in the next week, particularly if somebody has a great question. So ask us a great question that we can really, take off on, and that other people might be interested in, and we will get into it. And yes, that whole issue, I appreciate that, Mom, if you're talking about how your daughter feels shaped by the word disability. And it's a big, right? Identity is a biggie for us all.
That's a really, I don't know what else you would say, but it's not a very useful word for the person who is experiencing a certain, some sort of difficulty in life, to talk about them as being disabled. They're fully able to do what they're fully able to do, and they are able to learn more things than they were born with. So yeah, there are some things that they can't do, but I can tell you what, I can't draw either. I, you know, I'm not an artist. I don't know how to do that. I can't do it. Seems like I have some learning disability in that area, maybe. So, but see, even that word is, a learning disability. No. I was a teacher for a number of years, and I knew that if I had a student who failed, I had to admit that I had failed to teach just as much as that person had not learned, as I failed to teach. I'm the adult. Well, finally, I was teaching in college and in technical colleges. They're all adults. But it was my lack of flexibility as much as their inattentiveness, because when you get to that age, people are not going to school by accident or because they're forced to. They're paying for it. And so it had to do with my inability to convey. So Richard Bandler, one of the creators in NLP, said that, the problem is we get at these kids that are ADHD, and we put them all in a room and give them Ritalin and a teacher in there. He says, I think we should put them all in a room and give the teacher Ritalin and let them learn how to deal with people who have different learning methods and ways of learning. So anyway.
Thank you. I see a couple of great questions there at the end. We'll think about those, and let's maybe end on the note that we could all think about something that perhaps we've been holding on to that we might like to let go in a painless, quick, and easy way. We just haven't allowed ourselves to even believe it was possible. Thank you, Larry Wells.
Well, thank you for you're asking the questions, and thank everybody for showing up and listening to us.
Yeah.
Have a great day. One of my favorite things is have a happy forever.
Bye-bye.
It's possible.
Bye.